Virginia, out of our 11 people in the House, only Bobby Scott and Jim Moran have signed on. So young Perriello ain't signed on. Glenn Nye, so not signed on. We've already had a conversation with Jerry Connolly. Steve took care of that one.
Well, we need to work on him.
Right, we got to work on him. Rick Boucher down at Southwest Virginia, not signed on. Warner and Webb, not signed on.
Now, I should tell you about Webb, because I personally asked him at a meeting, at a brigades meeting a couple months ago, whether he would support, and I gave him the bill number and said the Democracy Restoration Act, and he sort of looked at me blankly like, what's that? I said, that would enact to restore ex-felons' right to vote in federal elections. So I would support that. So he is inclined to support that, and I think hopefully he eventually will co-sponsor, because it's very consistent with his criminal justice reform initiative. You know, he has said very publicly, and I think very courageously, that we either have the most evil country in the world or the most over-incarcerated people in the world. One or the other. Which is it? You know? So he understands the importance of people returning to the community and being restored the right to vote. So he gets it conceptually, but he's going to put his name on the thing. And, you know, there'll be people who will say, oh no, Jim, you know, if you put your name on this, it'll look like you're for felons or something, you know. There's no active, as far as we know, there is no active group as of yet that's actively lobbying against this.
That's opposing us, right.
Right.
I have a question about the slide that says that there's 80% of the public overwhelmingly support it. I guess if I were thinking of the general man on the street, law-abiding citizen, they would be more inclined to, one, not know misdemeanor, felony, what is all of that about? Because I'm, you know, I've never been arrested. I have no idea what that's all about. But it seems like that when you hear people on talk shows and Dr. Phil, they're more inclined to, you know, they're a criminal. Throw away the key. You know, much less give them the right to vote. So I would think that they would, more the public would be saying, well, that depends on what do they do, what really is a felon. I honestly, you know, like when you said the 3 misdemeanors equal a felony, I don't understand all those details and things, and I would guess that the public doesn't either. So where do we come up with the 80%? How do we have people's support, or is it, how do we educate the people to know whether we do have their support?
Well, you know, you've raised several things. I mean, first of all, there's the difference between a violent and a non-violent felony.
Right.
You're certainly going to get more people supporting restoring the right to vote to people with non-violent felonies than violent felonies. The problem with that kind of analysis, however, is if you draw the line between violent and non-violent felonies, first of all, what things are violent and what things are not violent? Then you're sort of worrying about, is resisting arrest, is that a violent felony or is that a non-violent felony? You have a lot of people, I remember talking to a woman from Florida. This was a story before Charlie Crist did what he did by executive order. This was a woman who had registered a lot of people in Florida to vote, and she got through, she was one of the people who was leading to getting through a minimum wage increase in the state of Florida. And I talked to her afterwards and congratulated her for what she'd done. She said, yeah, you know, I couldn't even vote for it. I said, why? Because I have a felony conviction. When I was 18 years old, some cop was hassling me, and they charged me and convicted me of resisting arrest. Because in her view, she, you know, was being unjustly arrested, and they charged her and she got convicted of resisting arrest. And now she was in her 40s and she still couldn't vote because of the Florida law. So, you know, I guess what I'm saying is it would be good to make the argument more about the justice, the fairness, the redemption, the forgiveness, you know, whatever words you can use, about you've done your time, you're back in the community, you should be restored to citizenship, and try not to differentiate between the nature of the crime, because once you get into that, then you get into the stick it. Well, okay, people who've done this should vote, people who've done that shouldn't vote, and then we're getting into this kind of mishmash of trying to analyze it.
Public opinion would go that direction.
Well, there would be some, certainly there would be some people. The other thing that you raised, which is a different issue, is that, as this slide shows, 80% of people, when they're completed their sentence, should have the right to vote, and over 60% believe that people on probation or parole have the right to vote. There are states right now that you get out of prison, you still are denied your right to vote until you finish your probation. So the issue there would be, do you get your voting rights restored upon getting out of prison, or do you have to wait until after you finish your probation? So you can have different attitudes toward that kind of thing. So I guess it depends upon precisely how you frame it. But the way the Democracy Restoration Act approaches it is very simple. You're at the point where you're getting released from prison, you're being told, even though you're still being watched by the probation department, that you're going to go back to the community. We want to give those folks the opportunity and the responsibility of being a full citizen, which includes the right to vote, period. So we're not going to get into this nitpicky analysis of what the nature of their crime was, and whether or not we are think they're morally fit or not. We're basically saying you've done your time for your crime. Now you're back in the community. You're a citizen. You can vote. So it's like a simple, straightforward thing. There may be some people say, I don't think they should ever vote for the rest of their life. Sure. And but
they don't want them in their community anyway, so that's,
well,
that's
yeah,
what their thoughts
but guess
are.
what? In Virginia, anybody know the corrections numbers? I mean, this state is astonishing number of people in prison. I mean, just Virginia, is in a lock them up and throw away the key state. So
because it's a major moneymaker.
There's a lot. Yeah, this is a whole other issue. That Jim Webb addresses. The prison industry in this state is a privatized industry. Lots of communities depend upon that revenue. They don't want people, leaving prison because they make money on it. They have the prison guards and the food service and the whole routine. It's a major money maker. People make money on people having been in prison. People get arrested, a huge number for drug offenses. And then they got arrested for smoking marijuana when they're 18, and now they're 50 and they can't vote. Now, you can say whatever you want about the nature of the original crime, but what does that mean for our cohesiveness in our society when we get all these folks sort of marginalized like that? Is that healthy for us as a society? Is that healthy for us in terms of people's attitude toward law and toward voting and toward being in Virginia? Or does that create a lot of resentment and alienation and disconnect and isolation and all that? So there are folks who, and I heard this guy was really good, he views himself as a conservative. He lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where Jerry Ford came from, which is a fairly conservative part of Michigan. He is with a group called the Crossroads Bible Institute, and he talks about Christian forgiveness and second chance and redemption and all those kinds of concepts. That teaches him and his folks that he works with that you should, and there are people like that, like Chuck Colson and his Christian Fellowship, Prison Fellowship, whatever it's called, and the Rutherford Institute, which is a libertarian group based in Virginia. They're all supportive. I don't know about Colson, but the Rutherford Institute, but a lot of folks who are people of faith come at it from that point of view. Yeah, Linda.
Oh, just in terms of what Kathy was saying, is it possible to approach it maybe deconstructing the whole thing? I mean, the conflation of crime and voting, they don't necessarily go together. It's just that people are used to it. But if we go back to American values and one man, one vote, and of the people